The NFL Week 18 schedule is out, and the Chargers have caught a huge break because they will know exactly what they are playing for on Sunday, and it's starting to feel very realistic that they could somehow steal the 5 seed.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, well, on Saturday, we are all going to be Cincinnati Bengals fans because if they take care of business on Saturday against the Steelers, then the Chargers have the opportunity to beat up on the Raiders and secure the 5 seed and a trip to Houston, which I know is definitely going to be favorable for them and Jim Harbaugh's first season back in the NFL and in the playoffs. And Justin Herbert making history again, breaking records. It's unbelievable to watch what he's doing when he finally has somebody in his corner, a real head coach. And unfortunately, Elijah Molden, the player that Joe Ortiz traded for, is done for the season.
Yeah, there's definitely, bad news that comes along with that last game. Such a pivotal part of the secondary, and we'll talk about what happens next in that group. But you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And FanDuel currently has the Cincinnati Bengals as 2.5-point favorites on Saturday night against the Steelers. And Saturday is super important because on Sunday night, the NFL released what the schedule is going to be in Week 18, and it could not have played out any better for the Chargers than it did. And the first game on Saturday is the Ravens versus the Browns with something to play for, with the division to play for, and they should absolutely smoke the Browns. And then after that, it's the Steelers and the Bengals. Why that is significant is the Bengals won't know what their playoff fate is at that point. The Broncos play on Sunday. The Chargers play on Sunday. They're going to know what they have to play for. So the Bengals will have everything to play for against the Steelers. The Steelers likely will be playing for seeding, but I'm sure are still going to go at that game as they always would. But all of a sudden, David, the Chargers now get the huge advantage of knowing whether or not they should play their starters on Sunday, or knowing whether or not they will have anything to play for, or if they were going to be locked in to the 6th seed.
Yeah, this is beautiful. I mean, this could not worked out much better for the Chargers, in the fact that they have everything, all the information is going to be provided to them the day before. They're going to know exactly what they're going to be eligible to be able to capture, whether it's the 5th seed or the 6th seed. The 5th seed is the highest seed that the Chargers can achieve up to this point. Obviously, it's going to take the Bengals taking care of business against the Steelers. And then, of course, the Chargers, in turn, we're going to have to take care of their business, beating up on the lowly Raiders and making sure that they sweep 2 out of the 3 of their AFC West division opponents for the first time in a very, very long time. But That's what would be the ideal situation for the Chargers, right? Obviously, the Houston Texans are not as scary as the other teams that are in the NFL AFC playoff picture. I think that's a game where a lot of Charger fans, including us, feel very confident that the Chargers can go into Houston and win that game.
Yeah, there's an argument to be made the Chargers would want the Steelers more just because the Steelers in this scenario would be coming off a 4-game losing streak, and they're already on a 3-game losing streak right now. This is huge for the Chargers because the 5 seed seemed like it was going to be a long shot, and then the Steelers all of a sudden lose 3 games in a row. And now you're looking at these 2 scenarios where the Steelers win and you are locked into the 6th spot, and most likely 99% sure you're going to be headed to Baltimore for a rematch of the Harbaugh. That's not what you want. You have a chance to get a pretty broken Texans team that hasn't been impressive in a month and a half. Really, most of the season has gotten to beat up on a bad AFC South. And now you have a chance to go to Houston in a game where I think the Chargers are favored going into Houston at this moment. Like, I think if you had
if
that
that
game
happens,
this
I'm
weekend
going to that game
with stakes, you live in Texas. That would be awesome, obviously. But The fact that the Bengals just have to beat the Steelers, which is a divisional game, it's not a
Yeah.
gimme at all, and
No
then
doubt.
you somehow get the Texans by just beating the Raiders, it doesn't get any better than that. And the Chargers now will know at least if that game is important. So to have the schedule breakdown this way is huge. But yeah, the second best scenario is unlikely, but it's the Ravens losing and the Steelers win. If that happens, because there's only 3 scenarios that can play out on in this weekend. If the Ravens lose and the Steelers win, the Chargers would be heading to Pittsburgh, playing a 6-3 matchup. And I think you would absolutely love that. But obviously, you would need the Ravens to lose, and they're 17.5-point favorites hosting a game, or, trying to win the division and get a home playoff game against the lowly Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably not going to happen. I mean, let's be realistic. And hey, yes, the Cleveland Browns did pull off a miraculous, very, very surprising victory earlier in the year, but obviously that had the added elements to it. It was basically a blizzard that they were playing the game in, and to their credit, that they played that game a little bit better than their opponent that game. But you just can't expect that to happen again. They've been cycling through quarterbacks. They've been trying to figure out who's going to be the guy. They tried Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston wasn't the guy, and so that's just a game you just can't expect the Baltimore Ravens to lose, especially when they have the division up for grabs, and only thing they need to do is win that game, and they are the division champs.
Yeah, and I mean, they're really hot right now, too. So I expect the Ravens to win. And the second most likely matchup that is going to happen is the Chargers playing against the Ravens in the first round, which isn't ideal. When you don't win your division, you get what you get kind of thing. But this is what it is. Bengals win, Chargers win, Chargers end up getting the Texans.
Yeah.
The Steelers win, and the Chargers, whatever happens at that point doesn't really matter because they are locked into the 6th seed. But then it becomes if the Ravens win or not. If the Ravens lose somehow, you would get lucky enough to go to Pittsburgh, which I think is a great option. But more than likely, David, if the Steelers can pull it off on Saturday night, and they are underdogs in that game, you have a rematch of the Harbaugh Bowl, and that would be very interesting. It's not ideal. I mean, the Chargers would be facing, one of the top 2, arguably, teams in the AFC. You do get to avoid the Bills, which is nice. I'm glad the Chargers get to avoid the Bills. But more than likely, if the Steelers win, you get that rematch, and that would be, a really fun storyline, but obviously a very scary game considering how that last matchup went.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens are very dangerous. They are obviously a flawed team. They've lost, 6 times this year. So they are a team that can lose, but it's just the things that they do well are basically the Chargers' kryptonites. They have the best rushing quarterback in the history of the National Football League with Lamar Jackson. And of course, they have a monster in the backfield in Derrick Henry. And those are the 2 things that the Chargers have really struggled with this year, containing that mobile quarterback and being able to stop a physical running back. Those are the 2 things that scare you the most. When you have Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh, you feel good about the opportunity of winning, but that matchup right there is not the ideal matchup for the Chargers.
Yeah, you'll have a chance, and you'll be freshly rested potentially, right? Because if you end up getting the Ravens, you will know that you have nothing to play for in Week 18, and you can basically have a bye week and get healthier and let everyone heal up, which is absolutely what should happen. Will Jim Harbaugh play his starters either way? That is something that is a very real possibility and something that we'll get to on tomorrow's buy or sell, because obviously for me, if you have something to play for, you play for the 5 seed and you potentially get a playoff win. If you have something to play for, you play your starters. And I know that's not even a unanimous kind of opinion around. If you don't have anything to play for, remember Mike Williams last season. You don't have to go, remember Mike Williams from a couple of years ago. You don't have to go very far back to see what could go wrong. And obviously your quarterback could get hurt too, which has already happened. Let him heal up if you have that opportunity. Will they do it? That's something for tomorrow's show. But the good news is, hey, you feel like you have a real chance to get a 5 seed and 11 wins in the first year of Jim Harbaugh, which is awesome. And arguably your best player, Justin Herbert, is maybe having his best season, and also just past Peyton Manning on the most passing yards ever in any player's first 5 seasons. So we're going to talk about Justin Herbert's incredible record and incredible season so far this year, and how the Chargers and why it was so important for them to finally get a coach that is worthy of him, and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you about Prize Picks because Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, and it's also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because unlike on other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks also offers great weekly promotions that you guys can get on this week with Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts plus select player projections up to 25% to add even more value to your lineups. And it's also the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. And the Chargers game is over, but there's still another game tonight. And this is how easy it is for you guys to get on the action with the Lions and 49ers. You go with Jared Goff to throw for more than or less than 248.5 passing yards, and pair that with Jahmyr Gibbs going for more than or less than 93.5 rushing yards. It's that simple. If you do that, you can win. Just download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. David, well, we talked about all of the different playoff scenarios that could go down this weekend, and I think the Chargers are in a great spot, but they're only in a great spot because this season they've been able to field a team around their great quarterback, Justin Herbert. They built a playoff team around him, and he still had to elevate the talent around him. But the fact of the matter is, the Chargers are about to do the one thing that has kind of been knocked against Justin Herbert outside of the playoffs, which is just consistently winning and making it to the playoffs. Well, he's in the playoffs this year, and he's coming off of a great performance on Saturday where he broke the record of the most passing yards in NFL history through his first 5 seasons. He passed Peyton Manning. And a lot of people would say, well, now they have more games. Well, he did it in less games than Peyton Manning did it. Justin Herbert's only played in 78 career games. Peyton Manning had 80 games over his first 5 seasons. There is no other argument for it. Justin Herbert, the most prolific passer through his first 5 seasons in NFL history, now has the record for most completions and now the most passing yards. And that is history, right? That's going to be super, super hard. Every year there's a wave of rookie quarterbacks. And as we saw with CJ Stroud this year, it's not always going to be that guy just because they're good in year one.
It's not always sustainable.
It's not sustainable always. And so to show through 5 seasons that you have the most passing yards with the quarterbacks and the level of quarterbacks that we've seen in the NFL, it's just insane, David, and something that should not be overlooked. An incredible accomplishment.
With multiple different offensive coordinators, with multiple different head coaches, in multiple different systems, with weapons that they've signed off the street, with some of the worst offensive lines in the history of the NFL, Justin Herbert was able to surpass and overcome all of that adversity because he is that damn good. Okay. And I think that's why everyone needs to remember and appreciate on a daily basis how special it is to have a quarterback that is as talented and provides the results and the production that Justin Herbert has provided in his first 5 seasons in the NFL. A lot of teams around the NFL draft quarterback after quarterback after quarterback trying to find their franchise guy. The Chargers, without a doubt, have an elite quarterback and have their franchise guy, hopefully for the next 10 to 15 years. Justin Herbert is that special. He deserves all of the flowers and all of the praise, and it's great to see him have a great performance and take another record.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's crazy to think that with all those things that you mentioned, I mean, this is arguably the worst set of skill position players that he's had. It's arguably the worst offensive line, especially it is on the interior that he's ever had. This is the most he's ever gotten sacked in his career, 40 times already this season. And that's coming off a game where you allowed 0 sacks. To do that and to have that scenario play out, but to still have the highest passer rating you've ever had in a season, to have the least interceptions that you've ever had in a season, to have, tied your career high in yards per attempt that you've ever had, while, Ladd McConkey as a rookie is wide receiver 1, while you have, a tight end and Will Dissly that's not in anybody's top of the tight end market, right? So to do what he's been able to do is really important. I think the other important thing to think about with this, David, is Manning didn't get to the playoffs or didn't win a playoff game until his 6th season in the NFL. Can you imagine the heat that he was under? Justin Herbert is in his 5th season. He's only made it once. Peyton Manning started 0-3 in the playoffs. So I think when you have something like this and he had Marvin Harrison and Dallas Clark and Reggie Wayne, it's important to keep in perspective, hey, just because he doesn't have the playoff win, there's other Hall of Famers, all-time greats that didn't get their first win until their 6th season, or Matthew Stafford, who wins the Super Bowl after so many bad years in Detroit. Your situation matters.
Oh, it 100% matters. There's no question about that. And with Justin Herbert, it's never been about the talent or the ability with him. It's been about the supporting cast. It's been about not having a great or having anything close to a good defense until this season.
Or a coach.
Or a coach at all, right? I mean, they'd cycle through a couple of them to find the right guy. And it took the Chargers organization, and the ownership to break out that checkbook and go get a guy who's a proven, established culture changer and winner at every single level. And what do you know? He does it again.
He does. And I mean, that is one of the, things that's not a coincidence here. Obviously, Justin Herbert did his first 4 seasons without Jim Harbaugh. So Jim Harbaugh doesn't get the credit for passing Peyton Manning. But what he does get credit for is finally being a coach that's coach enough to handle a quarterback that we know is elite. Like Justin Herbert, top 5 quarterback, argue with a wall.
Absolutely.
It's probably some version of, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. Could you argue he's a tier below those guys? Sure. But that's where the 5 are right now. And all he is missing is the postseason accomplishment, which I just told you. Peyton Manning didn't even do until after his 6th season is when he got his first playoff win, and people were sweating Justin Herbert over one playoff loss where his defense blew a 20-point lead in the second half. It's just everything is perspective, and it I think goes to show you how important the head coach is, because the head coach is now Jim Harbaugh, and it's no coincidence that Justin Herbert is now making the playoffs for only the 2nd time in his career in the first season of Jim Harbaugh. And I mean, David, I'm ready to call it for the most part. Like, Jim Harbaugh has already done this reclamation project with the Chargers as far as this year to get this team to potentially 11 wins in year 1. It's not 13-3 like he did with the 49ers, but you can absolutely say Jim Harbaugh has turned things around for the Chargers and has them going in a great direction.
It's not a coincidence. It's not an aberration. It's not a one-off. This is what Jim Harbaugh has done at every single level, whether it's University of San Diego, whether it's the 49ers, Stanford, Michigan, or the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh takes bad teams and turns them into good teams in very, very short order. And guess what? He did it again with the Chargers. He doubled their win total from last year and got them to the playoffs in his first season as Chargers head coach and first season back in the NFL in over a decade. People had a lot of questions. Was he going to be able to resonate and be able to relate to these adults after being in college football for so long? Was he still going to be able to adapt to the modern NFL game? Blah, blah, blah. Answer, yes, he is, and he has, and he will. And Jim Harbaugh absolutely should be the prime candidate for Coach of the Year after this type of performance. He earns it. He deserves it. Go ahead and put his name on the trophy right now.
It's a little myopic. I mean, there is, what Kevin O'Connell was doing with Sam Darnold as his quarterback at 2 losses, but I understand from David's perspective, yes, Jim Harbaugh, Coach of the Year. But I mean, the fact that he has a chance at 11 wins, which would be getting more than 10 wins for only the 2nd time since 2009 in his first season, right? The Chargers never won 11 games under Brandon Staley. They won 10 games once. Jim Harbaugh did it in his first season. Anthony Lynn, double-digit wins one time, the 12
with probably his
in 2018.
worst roster he's ever going to have, probably.
Which it should be, right? And we'll talk about Joe Ortiz tomorrow, who deserves a ton of credit for the roster they put together. To get a roster that's playoff bound, to get a roster that can get to 11 wins is huge. To have a roster that could sweep the rest of the division outside of the Chiefs, which has never been a given and hasn't been done in a long time, as David had said. But also a guy that's going to demand the most out of Justin Herbert, to kind of bring out the vocal leader in Justin Herbert, and I think just be a guy that stands next to him on the sidelines, where you're going into every week and not just assuming, oh my God, Justin Herbert is going to have to go into this game with his hands tied behind his back because the coach on his sideline is leagues below the Andy Reids and the other great coaches of the world. Now that's not the case. Jim Harbaugh is a great coach. He's a good football coach, and he's handled everything, I think, as good as you can. There are things you could question. The Greg Roman hiring, right? How sustainable is this type of offense? For sure. What you can't question is that the Chargers right now and the trajectory that they're on is something we haven't seen since we started covering this show. We've got to cover the playoffs one single time. Jim Harbaugh is giving that to us right now, or twice in our entire time covering the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh is giving it to us in year 1. It just feels like the era for this team, like you said, this is probably their worst roster, is undoubtedly going way, way up. But unfortunately, we do have to talk about some bad news because the Chargers are losing a huge piece of their secondary with the news that Elijah Molden is done for the season. And that's going to make things have to shuffle around, David, on the back end. Could they be getting some reinforcements? We're going to talk about that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel because FanDuel is the America's #1 sportsbook, and the NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And I'll tell you one thing, if the Chargers have something to play for, I'm making my $5 bet. If it's my first bet, the Chargers -5.5 going into Las Vegas next weekend. I would keep a very close eye on that line because depending on what happens on Saturday, that number could change dramatically depending on what the Chargers do. But FanDuel does have so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score touchdowns as well, how many points each team will score, and so much more because they also have so many different ways you can bet. But the Chargers are -5.5. The Bengals are -2.5. If those things happen, the Chargers could be the 5 seed and not get all my action with FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. David, well, we still have some more news to get into because unfortunately the Chargers are going to be losing a huge piece of their secondary and their defense. But thank you all, as always, for making us your first listen. We appreciate the everydayers and are so glad that you're here with us in the ride that we've been on, trying to get to a moment where we're talking about a chance for the Chargers to rest starters in week 18. And we made it through a lot of very tough Brandon Staley, Mike McCoy, Anthony Lynn seasons. But if you guys need a second listen, make sure to check out the new slate at Locked On NFL, where they have 2 shows a day with my guy, Tony Wiggins, and also Tyler the Madman Rowland, as they bring on the guests who cover their teams every single day on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. Elijah Molden, David, unfortunately, per Jordan Schultz, he is going to be done for the season. Suffered a broken fibula during today's game, per sources, per Jordan Schultz. Huge blow to the defense. I mean, let's just start there. The defense losing another starting safety at this point in the year. First of all, huge credit to Joe Ortiz for sending a 2026 7th-round pick and getting someone who's played as well as Elijah Molden has. But still, I mean, there's no sugarcoating this. It's hard to think a next man up is going to be able to replace the borderline elite production that Elijah Molden has brought to this team in 2024.
It just sucks, man. It sucks for Elijah Molden because like he went and played his butt off all season long to get the Chargers in position to where they clinch a playoff spot, and he doesn't get to enjoy any of the fruits of his labors because he broke his fibula and he's out and he's not going to be able to come back for the playoffs, which it's a travesty. It's absolutely brutal. It's very, very sad because this guy was an integral member of this Chargers defense, like a huge reason why they were allowed to bring Derwin James closer to the ball and get him up on the line of scrimmage where he can cause and wreak havoc, because you had somebody on the back end that you could trust to be that last line of defender, that deep safety that can go up and cover the back end. And when you don't have that, then you have to shuffle other guys, and you can't be as specific with Derwin James and where you want to place him, right? Yeah. And so it's really, really unfortunate that they have to lose Elijah Molden because he was fantastic. 75 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions, and one of 6 players with 7 or more passes defensed on this Chargers defense this year. He will sorely be missed.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even double down more than that. I mean, a career high in coverage grade for him. That is the nice thing, is at least he was able to show this season that he absolutely was in a bad situation in Tennessee and can play much better than he had there over the last couple of years. And he is definitely near the top of the players I'm trying to bring back if I'm Joe Ortiz going into next season when I'm looking at these internal free agents, because he's been that good. 0 touchdowns allowed all season. A passer rating against him when targeted, 44.8. He's had 1 game this season where he allowed more than 23 yards. Elijah Molden was irreplaceable on the back end and allowed your Derwin James, like you said, to do what he was able to do, getting close to the box, having 2 sacks on 4th down last week. And now you look up, David, and your safety room looks like this. It's Derwin James, Tony Jefferson, which has been a hugely clutch signing, seeing how things have played out now. Too. And now it's Eddie Jackson, who was just signed last week, and Kendall Williamson, who's a practice squad dude. Like,
Yeah.
that room is as thin as possible right now, and you're talking about a room that has Alohi Gilman on IR. Marcus May got waived when he was been put on IR. Now you're going to have Elijah Molden on IR. And, you had AJ Finley, who would be a guy who knows your system and could step up. He got stolen off of your practice squad. So all of a sudden, that room looks incredibly thin. I think the other hard thing is you don't know what's happening with an Alohi Gilman. It would be great to say, hey, reinforcements on their way. Alohi Gilman's going to be here. But, David, it's not quite that simple.
No, Daniel, it is not that simple, unfortunately. With the NFL and the IR rules, they are only allowed to bring back 8 guys from IR during the season. And so, unfortunately, that will not be happening at the end of the regular season. However, if you make it to the playoffs, which, as we all know, the Chargers are going to the playoffs, that allows them 2 more IR designations to return, and so that opens up the possibility for Alohi Gilman to potentially come back for the playoffs, which would be huge.
Yeah, well, and shout out to Simi Fehoko, who, was asked if he was going to be activated from IR, and he said he's actually feeling great, but that J.K. Dobbins was the last player they could bring in during the regular season. So once they make the playoffs, the hard thing is we don't know how freaking hurt Alohi Gilman is. We don't know how hurt Asante Samuel Jr. is. Per the rules, the Chargers will get up to 10 once they make the playoffs. If they've already hit their max of 8, which Simi Fehoko is saying that they did, then they could bring 2 back. Would it be Alohi Gilman and Simi Fehoko? It could definitely be. They seem like the most obvious options, especially with the kind of uncertainty around guys like a Jalen Reagor, guys like an Asante Samuel Jr., who we just never got updates from. But like, David, they need it bad because, with the guys that they have right now, like Eddie Jackson was playing in a similar defense, wasn't playing great, played okay in 14 snaps, but that number is going to go up. And it just sucks, too, because like Elijah Molden probably didn't need to be in the game. I'll say it, when he got
they could
hurt.
have pulled him the play before when he kind of hurt himself and they let him kind of go back on the field. They could have took him off the field and they should have. And I even sent a tweet out there. I was like, hey, this game's already in hand. There's no reason to put him back on the field. Now, obviously, you don't know, and the player, again, is probably going to be like, hey, I'm good. I'm going to go back on the field.
Sure,
So,
hindsight's 20/20.
A lot of factors you just don't know about.
Yeah, hindsight's 20/20 for sure, but the game was very well in hand. If you're talking about a guy, and they're very thin in that position, obviously, but you're talking about a guy that was questionable going into the game, right? That's an important part of it. He was fighting through something, didn't even look like he was 100% in that game before it was a blowout. When you're late in the third quarter and you're up like the Chargers were, there's a chance that he could have been taken out of that game, and it would have been very justified considering what his situation is. And now you could hope to get back Alohi Gilman, who had his best season of his career last year. That's a fact. Was very up and down in 2024. But the thing that you get with Alohi Gilman always is you get the instincts that could come up with a huge play when you really need it. Yeah. Whether it's a 4th down stop, whether it's a tackle in open space that you desperately need, it can go both ways with him because he takes chances. And sometimes those chances pay off in a big way and he'll make a big play. And sometimes this year, those chances have turned into big plays for the other team. But I think no matter what, you would rather have him in the secondary and someone is, well-versed in this defense as he should be in this point in this backfield if you can get him back for the playoffs.
Yeah, you absolutely would. The guy who is very comfortable with Derwin James, knows Derwin James very well. And a guy that knows the defense very, very well. Yes, he's been up and down as far as his game. Hopefully, if he's able to come back, he's 100% feeling fresh and he's ready to go. And I'm sure he's been locked in on the book side of it, trying to stay in the playbook, trying to stay in the coach's ears, trying to stay along with it, hoping to get the opportunity to come back in the playoffs. And so that opportunity is going to be afforded if he is healthy enough to take it.
Yeah, and it just seems like he would be easily the guy that would be most likely to come off once the playoff starts. Outside, Simi Fehoko as well. Both those guys super important. But one of those guys is, wide receiver 5. The other one is safety 2 when he was healthy this year. So it would be huge to get him back, but I also wouldn't rule out the Chargers, scouring practice squads out there, keeping an eye on maybe some veterans that get released before the playoffs that could come in and make an impact, and you could give a couple weeks to catch up to speed. I would say that's very much in play this week, and we'll see. I have a hard time believing they're just going to be good after losing Elijah Molden, not making another move at that position, even with the signing of Eddie Jackson, even with Tony Jefferson playing really, really well. It doesn't matter. You need more guys, and I think they'll probably make a move now that we know what this Elijah Molden news is. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. The good news is you got a bonus show yesterday, and you're also getting a bonus show where you're going to, what you always get every week, which is the buy or sell. I mean, that still has to stay. Tuesday is buy or sell day, so we'll be getting into the biggest Charger storylines and overreactions, like will Jim Harbaugh still play his starters even if they can't gain any position in the playoffs in that last week, in that last game? I don't know, man. I have a pit in my stomach thinking about it because I think there's a non-zero chance he plays him anyways, because that's ringing through my head what he said in that locker room. 11 sounds a lot better than 10. So make sure you guys are back here for buy or sell when we get into that tomorrow. Also, if we just saw the best offensive line performance of the season, if J.K. Dobbins has brought back this running game, and also if Joe Ortiz has pulled off a masterpiece putting this playoff roster together. So much great stuff, so many overlines and storylines and overreactions to get into, so make sure you don't miss it. Go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media. You can find us on Twitter at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. If you guys want, you can also call into the Locked On Chargers voicemail to get your buy or sell, and you can do that at 323-524-7924. We hope to hear from you guys with your 30-second Chargers question, and we'll try to get it on the show. But that's going to wrap things up for today. Great news today. Great news with what's going to happen in Week 18. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about if Jim Harbaugh cares about what just happened today, and more as we see if the Chargers will still play their starters anyways. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.